Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here, and today we're going to take a look at my Game Week 21 team selection. I've already made one transfer out of my two free transfers. I have one more remaining and that will most definitely be used as well. So later on in this video, I will discuss some of the options that I'm looking at as well. Hopefully you guys enjoy this video, and if you do, please give it a like and also subscribe as well if you are new around here. I will of course be giving away a free Fantasy Football Hub membership to one lucky subscriber as a token of appreciation for all the support that you guys have shown the channel throughout the last year. So all you have to do is be subscribed and you will be entered into the draw that will happen on the Game Week 22 deadline stream. So before we jump into my team selection for Game Week 21, I just wanted to quickly go through how I did for Game Week 20, even though it seemed like ages ago. Right, so I got a big green arrow to 211k in the world. I scored 94 points, so I'm very pleased with that. The template actually did quite well, and I did have quite a number of players that are template picks, I would say. So players like Palmer that did really well, Saka as well, very highly owned. Salah of course got 16 points, so I'm very happy I captained him. There was of course a point in time in Game Week 20 when I was considering whether I should do Darwin Núñez with Julian Alvarez so that I could captain him, but thankfully I did not do that. I rolled the transfer, so instead of having one less transfer in Game Week 21, I now have two, and of course, that would also, making that move last week would also have net me a lower score, because if I had captain Alvarez, then Alvarez only scored 7 points. I would have 14 from my captain instead of the 32 that I got from Salah as well. So very pleased with that. And in terms of some other players in my team that scored really well, it's also Areola. I'm happy that I have him for this haul. He did of course keep a couple of clean sheets in previous game weeks, but I started Dubravka instead of him in those. So thankfully for this 11-point haul against Brighton, I got him and very pleased with that. And also Ollie Watkins coming away with 2 assists. Darwin Núñez could have scored so much more but only came away with 1 assist. So some other notable players that I guess I'm quite disappointed by is Ezri Konsa. I brought him in Game Week 18, and since then I think he's got 0 points in 2 out of the 3 games, and the other game that he didn't score 0 points, I think he only got 1 point. So he's been pretty disappointing for me. But then again, the fixtures moving forward are there for Aston Villa, and defensively they are still putting up very decent numbers, second in the league defensively, so I still think that there will be clean sheets moving forward. I just hope that it will come soon for Ezri Konsa. So this is how I did for Game Week 20. Let's take a look now at my Game Week 21 team. So as it stands, this is how my Game Week 21 is looking like at the moment. I have already sold Mohamed Salah and brought Phil Foden in. I will talk about why I moved slightly early. I made the move last night as well. So I'll talk a little bit about why I've already made that move. And of course, I'll also discuss removing Son, because he's the other player that I will be transferring out with my other free transfer. I will discuss some midfield options that I'm looking at as well. Now, before we jump into that, I just wanted to mention for Game Week 21, the deadline has now shifted forward from Saturday morning to Friday evening instead. So do make sure that you set your team before Friday evening, which is the new deadline, and that is of course because the Burnley-Luton game has now shifted from Monday to Friday instead. Right, so do take note of that and set your teams. I'm sure a couple of people will forget as well, but I will be having a deadline stream 3 hours before the deadline on Friday, so hopefully you guys would tune into that one and be reminded of the deadline. But if not, let's jump into my team. And the reason why I've already sold Mohamed Salah for Phil Foden is for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Man City don't play anymore until after the Game Week 21 deadline. So there's no more matches for Man City. They're not in the EFL Cup anymore, even though there will be EFL Cup games coming up for Liverpool, Chelsea, etc. Right, but Phil Foden will not play, so already there's less risk of him picking up an injury. Of course, maybe he picks up an injury in training or something, but that would really be unfortunate. But I felt confident enough to make this move for a couple of reasons. Firstly, Salah was going to drop in price, Foden was going to rise in price, so that would be a 0.2 million difference. And of course, I've already mapped out my transfers moving forward. I think now is the time for me to start looking ahead, right? And I of course have also looked at the blanks and doubles in a previous video that I've mentioned. So I do have plans to use my funds moving forward, and I think I've already waited 1 week. I have made the transfer last night, so I think it is late enough that I have enough information and confidence that Phil Foden will be fit and available for Game Week 21. There are also, of course, players returning for Man City, and that could cause some rotation. But I think in terms of form and in terms of versatility, and the price that he's at. I think Phil Foden is definitely a player that I will want moving forward, and of course he does have a potential double in game week 25, so bring him in now could save me a transfer moving forward, where I may want him as my second City asset after Haaland in game week 25 if they do double in game week 25. So bring him in, I was pretty certain that I wanted this. So I made the move last night. Foden has already risen in price. Salah hasn't dropped in price, but he will drop in price soon. So that's why I've made the move. As for Son, the reason why I didn't do Son to Foden instead of Salah to Foden is because I can take one more price drop for Son without losing too much value on him, because I'm currently 0.3 million up on Son, right? And of course that would drop to 0.2 million if it's a bit confusing, but that would drop to 0.2 million only if Son drops twice. So I can take one more price drop for Son, and basically I have more time to decide my replacement for him. So that's why I haven't moved Son out of the team yet, but he will definitely be leaving. And as I've mentioned in the transfer plans video already, the moves on my team this week would be slightly different from other people because of my bench. Now my bench is Taylor, Livramento, and Adingra, and none of them are options for game week 21. Maybe Taylor against Luton, but he is yellow flagged of course. So I was pretty set on selling both Salah and Son, considering that both of them are likely to blank in game week 26 as well. Now, of course, there is a train of thought, or there's a strategy that you can choose to keep Salah, given that he doubles in 25, right? So you could have him on your bench if you have decent bench coverage, but for my situation, I just didn't. So I have to sell both of them. And of course, I do have plans to bring Haaland back in game week 21. So that would, of course, need some funds. So selling both of them just made sense to me. So looking at the rest of my team before I talk about Son replacements in the next section, I have Areola in goal here who plays Sheffield away. I'm perfectly fine with that. Manchester United away for Porro, Bournemouth away for Trent, and Everton away for Konza. So all of them are playing away from home, but they're very attacking. Porro and Trent are very attacking. Konza, of course, as I've mentioned, I do fancy that moving forward, Aston Villa will start to keep a couple of clean sheets with the numbers that they are putting up. So hopefully against Everton, Konza would get some returns for me, finally. And then in midfield, I have Palmer, Foden. I will replace Son, right? And then there's Saka against Crystal Palace as well. For the time being, the captain's armband is on Palmer because I don't really see a lot of standout options. I could, of course, change it, but Palmer does have a good reason for me to put the captain's armband on him for a couple of reasons. He's on penalties, he's very involved in the Chelsea attack, and he's just looking really sharp at the moment. Coming off an 18-point haul in game week 20, I think there's every chance that he could score quite well against Fulham at Stamford Bridge as well. So there we go with Cole Palmer and captaincy. Up front, I have Darwin Núñez, Solanke, and Ollie Watkins. It may not be ideal that I'm starting Solanke against Liverpool, but Solanke is also another player that potentially may have a double moving forward when they reschedule the Bournemouth versus Luton game. So that will be a good fixture for him. So I do want to still keep him in my team in preparation for that double where I may want him. So let's take a look at some Son replacements right now, and I would say that I'm looking at a plethora of options for a couple of reasons. I could of course go for the slightly more expensive midfielders, and by that I mean players like Jarrod Bowen, maybe players like Diogo Jota or Richarlison, those slightly more expensive ones. Or I could also go more cheap and I could go for Pedro Neto, Douglas Luiz, etc. And the reason why some of the cheap options appeal to me as well is because, as you will see later on when I'm making the transfers, these cheap midfielders right now will allow me to get Salah back in one move in game week 25 if I do need, if I want to save the free hit and basically not free hit in 25, I can bring Salah in one move by going for a cheap midfielder now. So I'll show you guys those options, but at least let's discuss a couple of more popular options. And of course, Jarrod Bowen is the one that's first on my mind right now. If he was fit and he wasn't yellow flagged, I think without a doubt he would be my Son replacement. But for now, it's because he's yellow flagged. He came off in the FA Cup with, I guess, an impact injury is what we are hearing. There's 14 days for Jarrod Bowen to recover. We won't hear from David Moyes before the deadline. So if I do make this move, it will have to be in the dark. And of course, it does not feel very good to bring in a yellow flagged player. But of course, this situation is different because there's so much time for Jarrod Bowen to recover. So I may just bite the bullet and take the risk with this one. But if not, There are also a couple of other options that I'm looking at. There's also Richarlison. Now, the reason why I'm not super convinced with Richarlison is because I feel he's a very short-term pick. So the thing with Richarlison is that Timo Werner will be coming in soon. And even now in Game Week 21, when we look back, he hasn't actually started a game and finished it at the same time. So basically, he hasn't played 90 minutes. He always comes off slightly earlier. And with Timo Werner in the team, we could see that trend continuing. And of course, players like Son will return after the Asian Cup. Madison will be coming back into the team as well. You could see a world where maybe Richarlison does not start week in, week out. And I don't really want that as a player in my team. So that's why he feels to me like a very short-term pick. For the time being, of course, Son is at the Asian Cup. You would imagine that Richarlison would be playing week in, week out at least for the next 3 to 4 game weeks. But after that, he becomes an issue. So that's why I'm not super convinced by him. Diogo Jota is also another player that I think a lot of people are looking at. But the issue with Diogo Jota, for me, is that he also feels like a very short-term pick. Because Liverpool are likely to blank in Game Week 26. Yes, they double in 25. But are we certain that Diogo Jota starts almost every other game from now until Game Week 24 or 25? I think it's hard to say because there are options that they have. Harvey Elliott, of course, could play in the Salah role, right, on the right wing. And of course, there's Gakpo and Nunes, and of course, there's also Luis Diaz. So there are a lot of attacking options, even though Mohamed Salah has left. So I'm not super convinced by Jota's minutes, even though he looks like the one that is the sharpest and the most clinical attacker out of all. So I actually do rate him as a player. But in terms of an FPL asset, unfortunately, he may not be super ideal. So I've ruled him out at least, right? And then, of course, other options that I'm looking at are now the cheaper ones. So let's talk about Pedro Neto because he's someone that has crossed my mind. The reason why I think I like to consider or at least think about whether I want to bring in a cheaper midfielder is because if I work out some of my transfers later on, so I will bring Haaland in for Darwin Núñez in Game Week 22. So assuming that I do that transfer now so that I can show you guys the funds, assuming I do Darwin Núñez to Haaland, I will have 5 million in the bank after that, and come Game Week 25, I will be able to afford Salah back in one move. Right, so that's to sell Saka and bring Salah back. I will be able to afford this in one move if I go for a cheap midfielder, which is Pedro Neto. Right, so you will see that now there are impacts on who I bring in for Son, and later on it will have an effect on my transfer move. So of course, chip strategy may come into play later on, but at least for the time being, I want to keep my options open, and this would be one of the possible ways that I keep my options open. Now, aside from Pedro Neto, in terms of cheaper midfielders, let me just reverse all the moves that I've made so far so that we can go back to my team for Game Week 21. So again, replacing Son. Let's say I go for another cheap midfielder. The other one that I'm looking at is also Douglas Luiz. Now, of course, a lot of us wrote him off towards the start of the season, where he's a defensive mid. We don't really consider defensive midfielders as FPL assets, but of course, of late, he's been just picking up a lot of points. He's ticking along very nicely. He's on penalties. Of course, he also is on all set pieces, so he does have quite high assist threat. And he's only 5.6 million. It's not the worst thing in the world to have to bench him in some game weeks if we're not confident and we have better players to field instead of him. So I don't mind him as an option as well. So he's also another player that I'm considering. So as you guys can see, there are a plethora of options, but I think all of us are pretty much in the same situation where there isn't really a standout option, and there is quite a bit of uncertainty as to how the future game weeks will pan out as well. So I do understand that it's hard to decide, and I'm in a similar situation as well. I will probably think about it a little bit more, but I'm keen to know what you guys would do in my position. Drop who you would bring in for my team in the comments down below. I will really need some help with this one. I will be making my transfer on Game Week 21 on the deadline stream itself, 3 hours before the deadline as always. So until then, I have some time to think about it. But if not, for now, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and found some use in it. I did ramble on a little bit, but there was quite a bit of midfielders to cover. If you enjoyed this one, please drop a like. Please do subscribe as well. And I will see you guys in the next video, which will be on Thursday. That will be a wildcard video. I did want to wait until the EFL Cup for Liverpool versus Fulham is completed, because that would actually have an impact on how wildcard drafts would look like for Game Week 21. So do keep a lookout for that one. If not, I'll see you on the deadline stream on Friday evening, 3 hours before the deadline. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you guys very soon. Bye bye.